and welcome to this midweek edition of The Chiefs. With us, of course, are Ana Marie Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star. Hi, Ami. And joining us in a while will be Luchi Cruz Valdez, Robbie Alampay of One News. Luchi Cruz Valdez will not be joining us tonight. Ami, what's your big story tonight? I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay,
There you
can
go.
you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Well, naguhulaan nga ngayon, di ba? Who dropped the ball daw?
Who dropped the ball?
Yeah, who dropped the ball on the Pfizer vaccine? But
The
anyway,
10 million doses of
10
Pfizer
million
vaccine
doses.
supposed to be arriving in January.
January, yes.
Next year.
Oo nga.
Yeah, that's a pretty big ball.
Sabi ni ambassador natin to the US, si Babe Romualdez, tuloy-tuloy pa rin naman daw yung negotiation, but it's much delayed na sa June. Sa June na yung dating. So sayang Anyway,
so any chance of having the vaccine on the first month of the year is up in smoke?
Wala na. Sayang, no? Sayang. Yeah, saka And of course, yung everybody, all the students, parents are talking about the face-to-face classes. In-identify na nga daw about 1,100 schools have been identified. So maybe we can go now to our guest.
Yeah, I sort of had an idea that you were going into your segue already. So let's bring in our first guest for tonight. Joining us tonight is Education Undersecretary Attorney Nepomuceno Malaluan. Sir Usec, thank you for joining us and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Yes, magandang gabi, Ed. Magandang gabi, Ami.
Hi, sir.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Ang aga naman.
Yes. Lipas ko nakaseko eh.
May siyam na araw pa eh. Anyway, Usec, sir, ganito po. Well, we do acknowledge, of course, the massive challenges of having done online classes since October 5. But certainly holding face-to-face...
Distance learning.
Yes,
not all are online.
Yes, sabagay po. But certainly holding face-to-face classes is going to be a pretty big gamble. And of course, DepEd, in considering doing it, is, I suppose, thinking that it's a risk that may be worth taking. Can you run us through how DepEd is planning to execute this, itong pilot po?
Well, first is why are we doing this? Is because it is very clear that originally talagang ang blended learning should still have some form of face-to-face interaction between the teacher and the learner, and it will really serve a lot of purpose and really complement the learning process if we combine distance learning modalities with some form of face-to-face learning. We have also seen that there have been certain changes. Some areas of the economy are opening up. More areas are placed under MGCQ already, and there have been actually a lot of requests and even appeals that we have been receiving from the field, both from DepEd units and even from local government units, to allow a certain level of face-to-face classes in their areas, particularly the remote areas, which really look like already, or you may consider to be some form of a bubble. So it is for that reason that the Secretary said, and this is an ongoing discussion also for continuous update to the President, what was requested was to allow us to do pilot study or pilot implementation before a final recommendation to the President will be made for this month of January.
Usec, I want to go deeper into the reasons for planning to shift to face-to-face classes again. Kasi previously there were some reports that DepEd said hindi yata natututo ng maayos ang mga estudyante with blended learning. Tama po ba to? Is that the feedback you are getting from the field?
Well, hindi naman totally, but ideally talaga, even blended learning, we went into pure distance learning, but it is considered all over the world by education systems around the world that you cannot totally replace a some face-to-face interaction between the learners and the students and among the students themselves for for an effective learning process. So it's mainly to recover that, and it's not really shifting back to face-to-face, but rather just to provide some face-to-face opportunities. So it will still be a combination of distance learning and uh, uh, and face-to-face learning. But you're correct that the intent is really to mitigate what areas where there are learning loss based on the differential capacities of both learners and households uh, in this process.
Usec, let me just follow up very briefly, just on a detail that you mentioned the term learning loss. I don't know if that's a technical term, but those are learning loss. Do we have enough data or experience to say what the compromise has been or what the learning loss has been, given
Yeah.
something that people will acknowledge is really a very difficult time?
Well, one is the capacity of learners for self-directed learning or for the self-learning process are truly differentiated. In other words, within a class, you will have students that have a greater capacity to pick up easily self-learning modalities. They can study on their own, learn on their own. But there are students that would really require guidance, greater guidance and supervision in the learning process. And it is ideal if there is somebody in the household that can assist the learner uh, at all times sufficiently. But that is also not the case in the country. So households are also differently able to provide that learning supervision. And so what we are trying to mitigate is the inequitous situation where there are learners that are more able and capacitated to cope with the distance learning modalities, and there are those that are less so, that can be helped by introducing some form of face-to-face classes to complement distance learning. Uh, one observation that have been given to us by our regional directors is that there have been reports that some children and household are returning activity sheets that are either incomplete or sometimes not answered. So it becomes more difficult to supervise the learning process in cases like that. And so we can prioritize some of these learners having that difficulties to participate in some face-to-face learning activities.
Pero sir, how exactly are you going to go about this dry run? Kasi you're looking at, I think, 15 to 20 students at a time dun sa
Mm.
face-to-face. But your average class size is around 40 students or up to 45. So you're looking at 40% or up to 50% of the usual class size. What happens to the rest? Will they be doing alternate face-to-face?
Yes. Yes, and not we will not need the full 5 days as the usual schedule is. As I mentioned, it is still going to be in fact this is the true definition of blended learning. We went into a blended learning that has been pure distance learning, but the original definition really technically of blended learning is that it combines both face-to-face and remote learning or distance learning modality. So we're just recovering that, but there will be prioritization because we know that we cannot do it across the country. For example, under the IATF guidelines, omnibus guidelines, for GCQ, it's really prohibited for 15-year-olds to come out, and so it can only be done in the MGCQ areas. But one matter that was emphasized by the secretary in her presentation to the president and the cabinet is that we are working on this on a framework of shared responsibility among DepEd. Local government units and the parents. So even there will be a voluntary aspect. In other words, if a local chief executive would not want to participate or not support such a process, then we won't do it. and within a class, a chosen class, if the parents will not permit their students, then we will not do it. So it will be a mix, and you're correct, Ed, that it will not be for all a full class size, neither will it be for the full week. So it will be on staggered basis, intermittent. There can be multi-grade arrangements. But what's important is there's an opportunity for teachers to interact with the learners personally, directly, and with some of the classmates under very stringent health standards. And part of the shared responsibility, as emphasized by the secretary, is that we could not confine the health protocols and standards inside the school premises alone, but it must also be because of the nature of this virus, have a strong commitment of the parents to strictly observe such health standards at home and also on travel to and from the schools.
Yes, sir. But
I
sir,
was
Like,
going to
I'm
ask
what
not
about
able to
that. I
will
imagine
was
the
going to.
increased workload on teachers. Di ba, sir, you'll have an increased workload on teachers because the teacher will now have to do both. Although I do understand they'll be alternating, but you'll be alternating two different modalities, and I can imagine how difficult that's going to be for teachers.
No, in fact, we just had a meeting this afternoon with our regional directors, and uh, I just forgot what region is saying is that some of our teachers in the truly remote areas really would sometimes are having initiatives to see or visit the children at the homes if this is a very confined community. And so uh, i- in other words, there is a something with face-to-face learning that also lightens the instructional demands and difficulties that are being faced by the teachers that will be facilitated. There are other things that can be facilitated by this. For example, we did not stop our school-based feeding program that is still being run by the schools through some mechanisms to bring learning resources to the students. So this can facilitate us as well. Even the distribution, for example, of the learning activity sheets that is done also either picked up or brought to the home. So there are trade-offs to this arrangement, and we believe that if done well, and we are allowing some flexibility to our regions to define their class management and instructional design on a blended learning mode, that it can result in greater uh, learning outcome as well as certain efficiencies on the part of the instructional load of the teachers.
Usec, I want to picture the pilot classroom. Are you going to use dividers, plexiglass or plastic or whatever? And the teacher, ano, will she be wearing PPE, for example?
Mm.
Ano
Not
ito?
necessarily. What is important is the social distancing and the ventilation and the wearing of the face mask, as well as the frequent hand washing and the symptom-based screening. Unfortunately, with symptom-based screening, and that's where you check the temperature and so on. There's been a recent finding that some of the children, there's a greater incidence among the younger age group for asymptomatic positives that can carry still high viral loads, which makes very, very important the other health standards, a very stringent observation of the health standards. Plus, we are emphasizing the shared responsibility because, as we mentioned, many of the transmission can happen at the home, and so there needs to be a commitment by the households, including a reporting mechanism whereby kalimbawa kung may alam nila na may na-expose o may symptoms sa household, hindi na papapasukin yung mga bata and will disclose that fact to the school. So there's not going to be a dividers, but there will be a reduced class size, a proper distancing of the seats. They will be wearing their face mask, and um,
Shield.
there will be screening for symptoms, and in eating places there will be no activities where they uh, I mean uh, reducing contact while doing the class activities will be the protocols that will be included. But this is also why the risk classification of an area is important. In other words, there are really the ones that we are receiving appeals from local government units are the ones that have had zero COVID for quite a long period of time, and they have monitored, for example, entrance and exit from the community. So, as I mentioned, areas that are really working like a bubble, and more instances, these students sometimes are getting out of their house also within this community. So it is in these areas that this will be done.
Usec, still on shared responsibility, as you've mentioned, we're trying to picture the home, the setup in the home. We're picturing the setup in the schools. But you've mentioned this, but maybe some more details. What about the space between the home and the schools, particularly the travel? What are the interventions there? You mentioned the parents; it's part of their responsibility. But what about the DepEd and the LGUs? Are there any interventions on the aspect of travel?
Well, with respect to travel, our learner enrollment and survey form uh, indicated that uh, for the responses about 15.5 million in the learner enrollment survey form, about 8 million of them actually, or 51% of those we process the responses to, walk from home to schools. Because if you see
Mm.
the structure of our, especially in the provinces, these are really proximate to the schools and within the barangays, and
Mm,
a
mm,
big number of them really walk, and another 2.2 million or so, or about 14%, ride family-owned vehicles, and the students that overall this is already 65.8 of the those that responded in the survey form. Whereas those that are taking public transportation are about 4.6 million, and only a small proportion, about 4%, are taking the school service. In the prioritization, we are including also prioritization where it is safer. Of course, those who walk to school will be the safer ones, and those who have their own vehicles. And for public transport, then we have to make arrangement to ensure that the transportation protocol are very clear. But the more likely, and as I mentioned, we are allowing uh, regions and division to design their class management. And this is where, for example, some shuttle facility can be provided by LGUs, and that's part of the shared responsibility. In other words, all of those details will be put into the final selection of schools and classes that will undertake this pilot study. In other words, it is a study phase preparatory
mm.
to a final recommendation by the secretary by the end of January.
Mm.
Okay. Now, as far as the curriculum is concerned, once face-to-face classes start, it's just moving forward from where we left off, or is there an opportunity for people to catch up, to make up for, as you said, the learning loss that they've encountered over the past months?
It is going to be the same most essential learning competencies. They will still be assisted by the self-learning modules, but now with greater instructional supervision by the teachers intermittently
Mm,
or on a staggered basis. So I think in a manner, it's like bridging into hopefully at some point the vaccines coming in, and then we will have to redraw the plans there. But we do not want to lose the opportunity, especially as we mentioned, when certain areas are more under MGCQ, uh, and there are appeals from certain local government units to start it. There's strong commitment on the part of both the parents uh, and the local government units. So in these areas, we do not want to lose the opportunity to reintroduce some degree of face-to-face classes to ensure that we are able to mitigate whatever gaps in the learning process there are from a pure distance learning approach that is, as you know, not under very ideal conditions.
Sir, can you give us an idea what areas are being considered? We already know what areas do not want to be considered, but what areas are you thinking of putting into the run?
Well, as mentioned by the secretary, we have received nominated schools of about 1,000 across all the regions other than
Davao,
NCR.
Cotabato, and NCR.
Yes, but the regional director of Davao has mentioned in our meeting this afternoon that they are reconsidering to nominate some schools in some of their remote areas. But nonetheless, we will trim this down to ensure a certain. We will be finalizing the list of schools based on typologies of schools, just to give a representative sample of the conditions. So there will be, for example, some island schools, IP community, rural and urban representation in these schools, and also across grade levels. There will be a school readiness checklist, a learner readiness checklist, a clear specification of the roles and responsibilities of the school authorities, the teachers, the parents, the LGU, the PTA, and the student themselves, plus some of the timelines and the submission of the class management and uh, instructional design that will happen. And so this will all be on record because, as we mentioned, this is going to be a pilot study where we will draw lessons from the experience, identify gaps, and the secretary, based on that, will make a final recommendation to the president on whether to expand the scale of such a face-to-face classes, while we hope, as the country does, transition towards a situation where a vaccine or herd mentality will be achieved.
Usec, I know the pilot is purely voluntary, but will you recommend that students join the pilot? Will there be an active effort to persuade parents to let their children join the pilot?
No, it's not. It's more a consultation and it's more a prioritization. For example, senior high school in the tech walk track that have greater requirement to be in school for workshop-based activities that require physical presence. So there will be prioritizations like that. This will be explained to the parents. It will be emphasized that the mutual responsibility and understanding of their own undertakings will be there, rather than a persuasion, rather than persuading them. So it is more really a consensual approach that we will be taking, and it is a process that has already started because the regions, in submitting this about 1,000, a little more than 1,000 nominated schools, have already undertaken that process. In fact, they were reporting to us that they already have many of them have resolutions already from the Sanggunian, local Sanggunian, PTA resolutions. And of course, other than that, we will be requiring an express permit from the parents for those that are participating.
It's like when you say consultation and consensual approach, you're still referring to voluntary attendance. or not necessarily.
Yes, yes.
Just to be clear,
Voluntary
just to be clear,
attendance.
it's still voluntary.
Yes,
Okay, so if
voluntary
they don't want
attendance,
to,
and
mhm,
yeah. Uh, yes, because as we mentioned, what we're it's very difficult not to have such shared responsibility, because it is not just a political uh, risk if there is no shared responsibility, but it is a risk actually to the integrity of the resumption of classes at this time, for which we are very convinced about as being the right policy direction. So, if something bad happens, it will all be blamed on the Department of Education. It can jeopardize actually the learning continuity that we were able to set in motion for this school year. And so we're taking care that all of our actions are promotive of learning continuity, but it cannot be any form of learning continuity. We must ensure that learning actually happens. And that's why this is a challenge that we are always trying to find solutions for. Uh, um, and of course, part of that, because of the situation that we are in, a very volatile situation, then it's important that we do it with care and, as I mentioned, a consensual approach with the immediate participants, the learners, the parents, and the local government units, along with the Department of Education.
Usec, we're starting to look at January, but we're heading into a very busy Christmas season where a lot of people are also traveling. A lot of people are trying to make their way back to family and so on. Do you see any risk with the coming holidays as the season that precedes this face-to-face experiment?
Yes, that was already indicated to us, for example, in the NCR region. That is why NCR did not nominate any. It isn't, I mean, it's something that is very visible to us, and so we hope that as a community, we will all take the necessary precautions in this
Mm.
Christmas season to avoid any resurgence that can happen. And so, if there's a resurgence in certain areas that are put in GCQ again, and the area expands, then even our pilot can be set back if that happens. So we are hoping that uh, we are able to come out of the holiday season with the level of containment that has been achieved so far, but is in danger of being breached if we are not careful.
Yeah,
You said,
but the mechanism is clear and, for that matter, quick enough in case we need to take a pilot area out of this experiment.
Yes, of course. Even if we have identified an area to be enrolled, and we are constantly monitoring through the IATF process, and DOH is really providing daily updates on the cases, the risk classification based on uh, on the transmission cases, as well as the utilization of healthcare capacity. And obviously, our local government partners, who, if there is something that happens into the locality, will be the first to, let's say, withhold any existing consent. And even in the central office, we just instituted a lockdown in the central office for this 1 week, because we've had two confirmed cases in the central office, and that would allow us to finish our contact tracing and mitigate any possible exposure. So we're prepared for those things, and we can act quickly in such instances.
you said at the start of this school year, your attention was called to mistakes in the learning modules. Kumusta na po? How is the effort to correct those errors?
Yes, two parts. Obviously, they have died down a bit. I think there is that sense of proportion that has to be made. In other words, with respect to the volume of the learning resources that were produced in relation to the number of errors, plus alongside a uh, you know not truly uh, errors or not founded on us. So those things have settled down, but the quality assurance has also kicked in because we have a one thing that happened is that there is a centralized quality assurance because the program was for the learning resources to all be vetted at the central office level, but because of the time element, we were compelled to allow the regions to have their self develop modules for the balance that we were not able to finish at the central office. So you can imagine how much learning resources in the field that have not reached the quality assurance at the central office level. But just to note that even at the central office level, we have found some errors like the one that was pointed out by Senator Pangilinan uh, on the characterization of farmers, for example, which is truly unfortunate. So we are tightening that, but again, these are temporal things that we are doing, and we are not losing sight of the strategic challenges that we are facing, and that is still the quality of basic education. We are deep into our preparations for PISA 2022 for our interventions. Those are not stopping. And I think it's both an emergency response without uh, losing sight of the strategic challenges, basically on education quality in the country. And let me tell you that the lessons and insights that we are continually uh, being able to put to the light with the results of the 2018 PISA are really informing our interventions for the future.
Yes.
Okay. Education Undersecretary Nepomuceno Malaluan. Sir, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
Maraming salamat.
thank you very much. Good evening to the chiefs.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll just go into a break, so please stay with us. And welcome back to the Chiefs. We are now in the final stage of our conversation, and with us is the Secretary General of the Alliance of Concerned Teachers, Mr. Raymond Basilio. Mr. Basilio, good evening and welcome to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi, Ed, at magandang gabi din sa ating mga tagapanood.
Magandang gabi po. Siguro nabalitaan niyo si Pangulong Duterte inapprove po in principle yung pilot ng face-to-face classes beginning January. More or less mga 1,000 ho na eskwelahan yan. Una-una po kayo, anong inyong posisyon dito?
Wala, una ang tanong namin, Ed, may mga nurses na ba sa mga eskwelahan na ito? May health facilities na ba? May health clinics na ba tayo? May hand washing facilities na ba tayo sa mga eskwelahan na ito? Yung mga classrooms ba natin retrofitted na para maging posible yung physical distancing? And how about the workforce? Paano po yung pupunan yung kulang na bilang ng mga guro, thinking na hahatiin yung klase mula sa 40 ay magiging 15 to 20 na lamang, no? Paano ito i-resolve? At ang isang tanong pa namin, magkakaroon ba ng health screening, magkakaroon ba ng testing sa mga bata at sa mga guro na papasok dito sa dry run na ito? Essentially, ang aming pinupunto dito, kaligtasan at kahandaan ng mga eskwelahan na involved para sa pilot testing na ito.
So sa ngayon po, ano yung nakikita niyo sa sitwasyon on the ground? Nakahanda, sa tingin niyo po, hindi pa tayo sigurado, hindi pa tayo nakahanda sa ngayong Enero, malapit na po ito, ilang linggo na lang. Kaya natin yung kakayanan namin. Kasi sabi nila sa ano naman daw dun sa mga lugar na wala na halos wala ng infection. Kaya yun lang ang pipiliin nila.
Alam niyo, Ma'am Ami, hindi po kami kumbinsido dun sa classification na low risk at saka MGCQ. Kasi unang-unang problema natin, wala pong mass testing na nangyari sa bansa. Kaya hindi po natin talaga nakikita ano yung extent ng infection ng COVID-19 sa ating mga kababayan. Pangalawa, ay wala naman pong nangyaring paghahanda sa mga schools nitong mga nakaraang mga linggo. Kasi talagang ang katunayan po, busy-busy ang ating mga teachers dun sa pagko-comply nung late na dumating na modules at kulang-kulang na mga modules. Ito pa yung nasa isip ng ating mga guro ngayon at wala po tayo na monitor na may nangyayaring paghahanda sa infrastructure, sa kalusugan at mismo dun sa usapin ng workload ng ating mga guro.
So, sir, linawin ko lang po, what your recommendation right now is until all of these things, hanggat hindi in place lahat ng ito, ang recommendation nyo is ipagpaliban muna itong eksperimentong to.
Well, mahirap din sabihin na ipagpaliban. Mas ang call namin ay gamitin ng pamahalaan yung panahon na meron sila ngayon upang i-fulfill itong mga requirements na ito upang magawa yung kinakailangan na trabahuin. Kasi sa tingin namin, ang dahilan naman kung bakit pumasok itong pilot testing na ito ay dahil dun sa lumulobong problema nung kapalpakan ng delivery ng distant learning. Maikwento ko lang, several teachers yung nagrereklamo sa atin na sa kanilang klase, 3 piraso lamang ng module yung binigay at sila nang bahala na humanap ng paraan upang mabigyan yung the rest ng kanilang mga estudyante. Looming po yung problema doon sa production ng modules na ito, sa delivery ng modules, kaya talagang ang naging resort na ngayon ay bumalik sa face-to-face upang mapagtakpan yung napakalaking kakulangan doon sa production ng modules.
Well, you put it that way, no? You put it that way na mapagtakpan. But and we understand where you're coming from. Pero dun lang po sa punto or at least sa intentions, totoo po bang makakatulong kung magkaroon ng face-to-face? I mean, does it also lighten the load? Does it actually help to rationalize the limited human resource we have, especially among teachers?
Well, Sir Robbie, early on, kami po ay nanawagan na po, kahit pa po noong pagbubukas ng klase, na habang tayo ay naka-distant learning, ay dapat ginagawa na yung paghahanda para sa eventual na resumption ng face-to-face classes. Kasi kami po bilang guro, napakahirap po magturo sa kalagayan ngayon na hindi natin alam, hindi natin nasusubaybayan yung learning process ng mga bata. Kaya simula pa po noong June, ang panawagan po natin ihanda ang education system natin para dun sa eventual na pagbabalik ng face-to-face classes. Kaya po kami nagugulat ngayon kasi may pilot na mangyayari pero wala naman pong nangyaring paghahanda simula po noong June.
Sir, point very well taken sa sinasabi niyo yung mukhang wala pang infrastructure yung mga eskwelahan to prepare the kids and the teachers para dun sa pagbabalik sa eskwelahan. Pero po dun sa punto po ng increased workload, ang sabi po ng DepEd ko, sa tama kanina si Usec Malaluan, sa kanilang pananaw, mukha raw mas gagaan ang trabaho ng mga teacher kung merong face-to-face kaysa sa full distance learning. Ano po tingin niyo?
Maaari po itong gumaan, no, kung magkakaroon po tayo ng additional items ng teachers. Kasi halimbawa po, sa kasalukuyan po nasa 40, no, nasa 40 yung class size ng ating mga teachers, no. Pag tayo po ay nag face to face, dapat nasa 15 lamang na estudyante. Ibig sabihin yung isang klase ay magiging 2. Paano po ito mangyayari kung i-maintain natin yung current na number ng ating mga teachers sa bansa?
Okay. Ang paliwanag po kasi niya hindi naman po 5 days a week yung face to face, parang staggered po yung gagawin nilang sistema. We're not yet sure how they plan to do it, pero ang sasabi ni Usec Malaluan kanina, may mga araw na face to face at may mga araw na distance learning. So sa ganung paraan daw, parang may konting hinga. At least that's as far as they say.
Ang nakikita po namin ay magiging yung isang klase ay hahatiin, no, yung first 15 ay papasok ng Monday, yung second 15 ay papasok ng Tuesday. Sa ganito pong kalagayan, liliit yung klase sa face to face, pero may online classes pa rin na i-maintain si teacher, no, after niya mag face to face. So parang madodoble ngayon yung kanyang class preparation na gagawin, no. Ito din yung kinakasama ng loob actually ng mga teachers natin. Kasi hindi counted, no, yung class preparation doon sa tinitingnan na workload ng mga teachers natin na in fact, napakalaking panahon yung ginugugol ng mga teachers natin sa class preparations.
Mr. Basilio, paano yung kombinasyon na yun? Kasi sinabi, it will be purely voluntary. So, mahahati yung klase, baka hindi lang hati, baka mas marami yung nag-face to face o kaya mas marami yung kabila. Hindi ba magulo yun? Paano yung yung sitwasyon ninyo, teacher kayo? Paano yung ma-determine yung performance sa klase kapag ganon? I'm trying to picture this, no? Ano nyo ba yun? Paano yung assessment ninyo ng performance? Ikukumpara nyo yung student, di ba? Ano epekto nun sa inyo?
Dapat po talaga early on ay nagkaroon na po talaga ng policy formulation dito, no, para nagkaroon ng malinaw na guidelines paano yung assessment ng mga bata. Sa ibang bansa po kasi talagang tunay na blended yung ginawa nila, no. 2 days na nasa school yung mga bata, 3 days silang online or offline, no. Pero before nag-start yung klase, nagkaroon ng maayos na training program sa mga teachers, may guidelines na nailatag, kaya alam ng mga teachers yung gagawin. Ito po, tama po kayo, kinakatakot natin. Baka ang labas po nito ay on your own, no, na mechanisms yung mga guro natin kung paano yung assessment, paano yung delivery ng instruction, ano yung curriculum na ibibigay, no? Usapin din po yan.
Sir, dagdag ko na rin yung katanungan. Hindi ko alam kung may sagot na, no? But sundan ko lang yung tanong ni Ami. Kung halimbawa, ako yung teacher ngayon, nagtuturo ako online, lahat ng estudyante ko online, so at least isang harapan lang. Pagka bumalik na yung face-to-face, now I'm starting to picture myself standing in front of a classroom again. Yung mga nasa online, ako pa rin ba yun? Naka-video ako, so I'm teaching kids in the classroom, pagkatapos nasa video ako, or ipaghihiwalay na ngayon yun. Iba yung nagtuturo sa online, iba yung nagtuturo dun sa classroom. In which case, what are the implications for the number of teachers that will be required?
Well, ideally, dapat po ganun, ano? Pero ang nakikita natin, parang magiging ako yung teacher sa classroom, ako din po yung teacher sa computer, doon sa online. No? Parang magiging ganun po yung itsura nito ngayon, no? Kasi baka ang computation nito, isang load lang, isang workload lang ito, no, na pagsasamahin. Kaya nga po, kami po, atat po kami na makita yung guidelines nito para alam po namin kung paano yung implication nito sa mga buhay namin. Kasi sa kasalukuyan po talaga, yung stress level ng ating mga teachers matindi po kasi kahit gabi na ay tatawag yung magulang, tatawag yung ate, kuya, magtatanong kung paano gagawin doon sa modules na ito, no? Talagang mahirap, no? Kaya nakikita namin handa po ang mga kaguruan na makipagtulungan, no? At yung panawagan nga dito ay i-involve naman yung mga teachers doon sa pagbubuo ng policy.
Okay. Meron po bang indication on when those guidelines will be crafted and then cascaded to the teachers?
Well, ang sa amin po kasi narinig po namin itong haka-haka ng pagbabalik ng face-to-face mula po sa bulong-bulungan lamang, no? Pero sa amin pong pagtatanong mula dito sa NCR hanggang sa Mindanao ay wala pong nangyaring konsultasyon sa ground, no? Kasi it can happen naman at least 2 months before or 3 months before para nakakapaghanda po tayo. Para alam din po ng mga teachers ano yung gagawin nila.
Meron na ba kayong alert, Mr. Basilio, na ipa-prioritize kayo sa vaccination? Kasi ang naririnig namin, mga health workers, kapag kayo na-priority sa vaccination, are you more willing, well, siyempre, mas willing kayo na mag-face-to-face, kaya lang yung mga bata, wala pa eh. Paano yan? Anong rekomendasyon, no? Halimbawa, mag-umpisa na mag-roll out yung vaccine. Gusto niyo ba sabay-sabay yung estudyante saka yung mga teacher? Para mapabilis nga itong ating balik sa pag-normalize ng formal education.
Kung sa usaping bakuna po, hindi po ata makatarungan na si teacher lang yung may bakuna, no? At saka yung mga bata ay wala, di sila po yung magkakahawaan, sila yung magkakasakit. Kabahagi po ng responsibilidad natin ay tiyakin din na malusog ang ating mga estudyante. Kaya kung may bakuna po, dapat lahat ito at hindi po ito nabipili lamang.
So, sa nakikita niyo po ngayon, nakikita naman natin na yung vaccine mukhang mga March pa dadating pinakamaaga. Sa tingin niyo ba kaya talaga natin yung face-to-face at this point? Apart from, sinabi niyo na kanina na yung mga hindi naman tayo sigurado na yung mga MGCQ areas talagang walang infection. Sa tingin niyo dapat tapusin na lang yung school year at maghintay na lang until the next school year?
But kami Ma'am Ami, hindi namin isinusuko yung aming laban para sa kabataan, para sa karapatan sa edukasyon. Kaya kahit po ngayon ay talaga yung call namin, posible po talaga tayo mag face to face. Kailangan natin tugunan yung mga pangangailangan ng ating education sector. Halimbawa po nito, nalulungkot po tayo na doon po sa bicameral conference, doon sa pag-aproba ng 2021 national budget, 13 billion yung tinanggal para sa infrastructural development ng ating mga pampublikong eskwelahan. Ito po sana ay maaring gamitin upang i-retrofit yung mga classrooms natin. Ito po ay maaring gamitin upang pampagawa ng health clinics. Ito ay maaring gamitin upang magpagawa ng hand washing facilities at ng mga comfort rooms sa ating mga eskwelahan. Kaya po nanghihinayang kami dun sa 13 billion na tinanggal ng bicameral conference.
Sir, curious lang ako, sa kabilang banda naman, kasi yun naman ang sinasabi ng IATF, ng gobyerno, and even some LGUs, whether on the barangay level or the municipal or provincial level, yung iba sinasabi, stricto naman tayo dito sa pagpipilian ng mga lugar. Yung iba dito, wala pang kaso at all. I'm just curious on the level of the public school teachers, meron din po ba kayong mga komunidad na mga guro na nagsasabi na, sa totoo lang naman, parang sa barangay namin, kaya namin eh. Sa totoo lang naman, sa barangay namin, liblib naman kami, never nagkasakit, wala naman turista dito. Meron po bang mga ganong mga barangay na sa totoo lang, pati yung mga guro sinasabi, kami kaya namin, naniniwala kami kaya namin mag face-to-face?
Well, tama po kayo dun, Sir Robbie. Meron po talagang mga ganong instances. Kasi talaga naman, yung nasa far-flung areas na wala namang communication sa mga city centers, at walang pagpunta sa mga city centers, maaari talaga sila. Pero ang naging reklamo talaga kasi nila ay hindi sila makasabay doon sa distant learning na pinapatupad. Kasi walang kuryente sa area nila, walang printer, walang bond paper, walang ink, at paano nila gagawin yung mga modules. Ito yung naging primaring dahilan ng mga teachers kung kaya gustong-gusto nilang bumalik sa face-to-face kasi wala po silang magamit. Ito po yung kahit po dun sa hindi mga park lang, basta mga probinsya po, ito yung problema sa ngayon.
Papa, kung kaya po sa mga komunidad, yung po ba sususugan nyo na, sige, baka doon pwede mag-pilot tayo ng face-to-face?
Well, ang isang requirement na siguro hingin namin dyan, at least may health personnel tayo that will attend to the health needs ng ating mga bata. Kasi hindi na po yan kayang tutukan ng ating mga teachers. Kasi sa kasalukuyan po, ang ating mga teachers ay aside from practicing their profession as teachers, ay inuutusan din po maging clinic teacher, mag-handle noong health needs ng ating mga estudyante. Hindi po kami trained sa ganyan na mga kalakaran.
Yung sinasabi yung retrofitting ng schools, yung rollout ng vaccine, hindi naman yan sabay-sabay eh. Sa tingin nyo, kahit dumating na yung vaccine, dapat mag-invest tayo. And what exactly do you mean yung retrofitting? Yung magdi-distancing ba yon, or maglalagay ng barriers? Or ano po ba yung ibig nyo sabihin nun?
Ma'am Ami, maraming schools tayo na hindi well ventilated, ano? Talagang ang reklamo ng mga teachers natin diyan, para kang pumasok sa pugon, no, na pagpasok mo presko ka, paglabas mo ay basang-basa ka ng pawis, ano, kasi hindi ventilated ating mga classrooms. Maari po kasi nating matutunan yung ginawa sa ibang bansa na talagang nilagyan ng at least yung division sa pagitan ng mga upuan, no, na alam naman natin yung mga bata medyo makukulit, no, sa klase na mapipigilan silang lumapit sa kanilang kapwa estudyante. At the same time, tama po kayo, yung pag-i-invest natin sa infrastructure, ito po ay pagtingin sa hinaharap na maaaring may mangyaring pandemya na naman sa mga darating na panahon, kailangan po maging handa yung ating public school systems.
Okay. Alliance of Concerned Teachers Head, Mr. Raymond Basilio. Sir, maraming salamat po for joining us tonight.
Salamat po.
Maraming salamat po.
Okay.
Okay. So it's a Wednesday. We are now in the hump day.
Yes.
Lumalapit
Baka magkaroon
na.
ng briefing mamaya-maya. Naghihintay pa tayo.
Talaga? May briefing tonight?
Hindi ba Wednesday daw magsasalita? Wednesday?
Wednesday na ba? Official.
I lost track already of that. I just waiting for the next day, honestly.
Cabinet meeting, di ba? Kaya parang nila to Wednesday.
Parang inunti-unti tayo, no? Parang inunti-unti tayo. Sinanay tayo na Monday. Tapos ating gabi na Monday, naging Tuesday. Ngayon, officially, Wednesday na pala, according to Ami.
Hindi naman dahil lang daw to sa cabinet meeting. So anyway.
Okay. But Ami, what are we looking at tonight? What issues could probably be resolved tonight sa cabinet meeting?
Ewan ko, baka magsalita siya tungkol doon sa vaccine. But yung status natin, I don't think it will change.
But Sinovac is still the big story tonight, and tomorrow it's becoming much more official that Sinovac is the priority.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Saka medyo na hindi nagkakaintindihan yata yung cabinet member about the one who dropped the ball, ano? Baka magsalita siya dyan.
Sabi ni Foreign Affairs Secretary, Captain Ball daw eh. So you could read that either
Captain
two
Ball.
ways. Sino bang Captain Ball? Well, you could speculate on DOH Secretary Duque, but then you could also look at Health Secretary
si Galvez,
Galvez as vaccine czar, di ba? So sino yung Captain Ball? Supposedly Senator Lacson already knows.
Ang ini-imply ni Senator Lacson, yun ang basa ng iba, is Secretary Duque. Yun ang ini-imply niya.
Kasi nakailang laglag na rin ng bola pero hindi pa rin matanggal.
Oo nga, siya lang naman yun, hindi naman yung si Galvez. So, ewan ko kung mag-i-intervene dyan si Sabi ni Teddy Boy, ayaw doon na magsalita, ayaw na napag-away.
Oo naman si Secretary Duque, talagang markado na siya, di ba?
No ball was dropped daw, sabi ni Secretary Duque. Sabi niya. Dahil nga daw tuloy-tuloy naman yung negotiation.
Anyway, malalaman natin baka kung ito ang pag-uusapan. We never know.
Yeah, we never. Baka yung ICC pang gipin. Alam mo naman, pag mainit ang ulo eh.
Okay, baka NPA na naman.
Baka makapunta doon. NPA, hindi daw mag-declare ng ceasefire din ng NPA. So we don't know. Abangan na lang.
Okay. It's a hump day, so we might as well enjoy the downslope. We'll see you again tomorrow. That's it for this midweek edition of the Chiefs. We hope to discuss here. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Edling of One News.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News.